Hi, I'm Stan, and today I would like to talk about the Zodiac debates. Let's get right into it. The Zodiac debate is something that every astrologer has to deal with sooner or later, and usually sooner, because the question arises, okay, there's two kinds of zodiacs, or there's one zodiac, but there are two systems to divide it. Which one am I going to use? So let's start with some definitions. The sidereal system defines the starting point of the zodiac in reference to the stars. The tropical system, on the other hand, defines the zodiac or starts the zodiac at the point where the sun's path, which is the ecliptic, cuts the celestial equator, that is, at the spring equinox. The celestial equator is the Earth's equator projected or extended into space. Okay, so there's one zodiac and there's two systems, not of division, but of where exactly this zodiac starts, where the first point of Aries starts. At one time, the sidereal and the tropical systems coincided. Then, slowly, due to the precession of the equinox, both systems drifted apart, and they drifted apart at the rate of about 1 degree every 72 solar years. And since then, the astrological community has been divided as to which system is correct. Now, there's three views that one can take, three main views on the issue of the zodiac debate. Some astrologers feel that both systems can be used interchangeably. Others argue that one system is correct and the other must be wrong, and still others, including myself, reckon that both systems are correct, although not interchangeably but complementary. Okay, so let's take a look at those three views. So the first view, the interchangeability view, is when the student inquires about, okay, which system is correct, they are usually told, the politically correct story that astrology is a language, and how can one language be more correct than another? The problem with this analogy is that in reality, astrology is not a language, at least not like German or English. If it must be compared to a language, it should be to maths, which is an exact science. 2 and 2 makes 4, it's not 5. And if we ever want astrology to be respected as a science, we should treat it also as such and not make statements like, okay, both can be correct. To use both zodiac systems, the sidereal and the tropical, simultaneously for celestial longitude is absurd. The sun in Aries is not the same as the sun in Pisces. So that's the first view. The second view, the either or view, is, this stage logically follows from the first. When you realize the absurdity of interchangeability, you begin to realize, okay, if both cannot be correct, then one system must be correct over the other. The other must be incorrect. This view makes more sense, but then there's still the difficulty of which system is the correct one. Difficulty of making a choice. Okay. Then there is a third view. When you study astrology, and after a few years you delve into the question of the zodiac debate, and you hear both sides, you come to realize through your own research that both systems have their use, because you see the masters of astrology using both systems, and in ancient texts and throughout history both systems have been used, but you begin to realize as you look deeper into it that they were used not in an interchangeable way but in a complementary way. and that's a challenge in figuring out how exactly. So let me start with the case for the sidereal system. In myths and legends from around the world, they claim that before the fall of mankind, whether this really happened or not, or whether this is mythology or not, it doesn't matter. But they say the earth was blessed with an eternal spring season. What does this mean? It means that if we take it literally, that the earth's axis must have been upright, because it's only with an upright axis that the sun is always right above the equator, and every day was an equinox day. And the equinox, as we know, is the beginning of spring. So every day was a spring day, an eternal spring day. Now, whether this was really the case in the ancient past, there's no way that at this time we can figure this out. So let's just use it as a work hypothesis, or just theoretically. It doesn't matter whether this was really the case at one point. What does matter is that if you take a planet, let's take the Earth with an upright axis, the only system possible is the sidereal system. There's no discussion about this. Why is this? Because the tropical system only comes into existence with a tilted axis, because a tilted axis generates the sun's four cardinal points. And without the cardinal points, there's no tropical system possible. The only way to divide or to start the zodiac is according to a fixed point in regards to the stars. Or else you must be of the opinion that on a planet with an upright axis, no astrology is possible. This alone, the fact that when you have an upright axis, the only system that is possible is the sidereal, this alone validates the sidereal system. So, and as you see, this does not come from scripture. This is pure logic. So, what about the starting point? The first point of Arius. Is this just a random point? Some people claim this is just random, and if this point is arbitrary, how is there any validity to the sidereal system? Well, in his book Primer of Sidereal Astrology, Cyril Fagan wrote that the direction in which the sun travels through the galaxy is towards 0 degrees Capricorn. Now, this is very significant, for it would mean that the 0 point of Aries, being 90 degrees from a solar apex, and that's important. Well, that's significant because it means that the 0 point of Aries is not just a random point. It's 90 degrees from the direction in which the sun is traveling. The only problem with this is that it has since been proven incorrect, so we cannot use this as an argument for a sidereal system. The only clue, the only hint towards a possible explanation, even though science still has to verify it, I have found in the Holy Science. In the introduction of this book, the author states that when the autumnal equinox comes to the first point of Aries, then the sun, in its revolution around its jewel, comes to the place nearest to the grand center of the universe. So this is very important, because if this is true, it means that the starting point of the sidereal, just like the starting point of the tropical system, is not random, but was deliberately chosen sometime in the past by some ancient civilization, or by some people that had more advanced knowledge about the cosmos and the stars than we have. The point is just less visible. The starting point of this idea is just less visible, or less. It has less of an impact because we are dealing here with a larger cycle. It is interesting to note that both starting points of both systems are linked to the equinoxes. And now the argument for the tropical system. The reason that the zodiac debate has continued for such a long time is because we have been considering the planetary positions from one coordinate only. longitude, while the answer is connected to declination as well. Declination is a distance of a planet or a star or a celestial point from the celestial equator. And the celestial equator, again, that's the Earth's equator extended, projected into space. Declination is the parent, we can say, of the tropical chart, for it is the Earth's declination that generates the equinoxes and solstices, which are the basis for the tropical year and for the tropical chart and the tropical system. The tropical chart shows us one cycle of solar declination from the vernal equinox to the next one, but it does not show us accurately one round of the ecliptic. The tropical system falls short of 1 degree every 72 years. So I'm convinced that the tropical was used in ancient astrology and it should be used today, only not with longitude, but with declination. In essence, the tropical chart is nothing but a circular representation of the declination wave of the planets. You could argue, or someone could argue, that the tropical system, the tropical longitude system, works for them. Well, of course it works, but just not in the way we thought it did. Tropical longitude works indirectly because it is tied to declination, hence the existence of declination longitude equivalent charts. Now, what do I mean with that? Excepting Pluto, because Pluto has always been a little goofy, and his orbit is not quite in the ecliptic plane, and he enters the Kuiper belt, etc. But except for Pluto, all planets have their most extreme northern declination at 0 degrees Cancer, their most extreme southern declination at 0 degrees Capricorn, and they cross the celestial equator um, at Aries and in Libra. So this is very important to understand that any effect that you imagine to experience from tropical longitudes is in reality an effect from declination. I repeat, any effect that you imagine to experience from tropical longitude is in reality an effect from declination. For example, when the sun is at 0 degrees tropical Cancer, you are not experiencing the effects of the sun's tropical longitude, but the effects of the sun's declination 23 degrees north of the celestial equator. Then the question arises, if the tropical chart shows declination, or if they're equivalent, why not continue to use it? And that's a good question. I think one of them is redundant. And which one? Well, of course, tropical longitude. Why is tropical longitude redundant? Because, first of all, tropical longitude, as I said before, falls short of 1 degree every 72 years of covering the entire ecliptic. So it doesn't cover the entire ecliptic. And one reason, one reason for this confusion, one reason why they have used tropical longitude instead of sidereal longitudes to cover the ecliptic is because the tropical year or the tropical cycle is very, very close to the sidereal year. It is very slow, as I said, 1 degree every 72 years, and that is one of the main causes of this confusion. Suppose, for example, that the tropical fell short like 30 degrees per year. I know that's crazy uh, idea because it would imply many other variables and things to happen with the Earth. But just suppose it fell short of a 30 degrees, like one sign, one whole sign, zodiac sign per year. Would people then still use this cycle to describe celestial longitudes? I don't think so. I doubt it very much. So that's why actually tropical longitude should never, or the tropical cycles should never have been used to describe ecliptic longitude in the first place. The second reason why the tropical longitude should or can be disregarded is because the other part of the equivalency relation, the declination, is more exact than the tropical chart itself. What do I mean? A declination wave is more exact in showing the exact degree of declination than the tropical chart does. Why? Because, um, for example, on a circular tropical chart, the moon's maximum declination will always occur around 0 degrees of Cancer. But the actual declination degrees may differ from cycle to cycle. For example, during a major lunar standstill period, the moon goes out of bounds beyond the sun's maximum declination of 23 degrees. It actually goes, the moon goes up to 28 degrees. So here again, we see that the tropical chart is less accurate, and we should use the actual declination wave instead. My view on this zodiac debate is actually supported by and it agrees with the ancient Jyotish scriptures. In his article A Tale of Two Zodiacs, Antadvipadasa writes, "It is evident that simply knowing of the existence of the two zodiacs is not sufficient. One must also know how and when to use each appropriately. In this regard, we find it in the Surya Siddhanta, chapter 3, verse 10, that the tropical zodiac is described as being used for the determination of Kranti, which is declination." Okay, so I am using or I am quoting scriptures here, but I'm not doing this as evidence. I'm rather using it here as one more indication, strong indication that the solution to the zodiac problem, to the zodiac debate, should be searched or found in this direction. We can ask, okay, now we know that the sidereal is connected to longitudes and that we use a tropical for declination, but how exactly should we interpret a chart having these two elements? Well, perhaps the sidereal longitude tells us more about the quality, the nature of things, while declination is about planetary strength. And I mean that in very general terms because also sidereal longitude, in certain signs, the planets are stronger than in other signs. They have their exaltation degrees, exaltation signs, and while in other signs they are in fall or uh, they're not as strong. So it's not a clear-cut thing. In both the East and in the West, declination has been used to determine auspicious times. So I think that's one use we can find for declination and one kind of interpretation. So a couple of examples. In the East, in India, we have the Vedanga Jyotisha. It's the only astrological text that's really connected to the Vedas. This text is what or contains the only real Vedic astrology because it's connected to the Vedas, and it mentions the equinoxes and solstices. So that refers to the tropical system of declination. And the goal of the Vedanga Jyotisha was to establish the correct dates for rituals and ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas. So that's electional astrology. So we see that the tropical or declination was used for electional astrology. Then, if we come more to the west, we find in the book of Exodus that Yahweh tells Moses to start the year from the new moon after the spring equinox. So again, we find reference to the equinox, so the tropical system, the declination, and it is used for electional purposes to start something, to start a project or to start time, and not just to start a new year, but that time was also chosen to leave Egypt. To wrap this up, I'd like to say that this view on zodiac debate may seem too simplistic to some, but most of the times the most simple solutions are the best. That's what Occam's razor states. We can ask ourselves how come we didn't see it before? We were fooled by our computer generated charts. They made us lose touch with what is happening in the sky. We were looking at the problem from one angle only. If you only look at the zodiac problem, or if you only consider astrology in terms of longitude, you will never ever get to the bottom of the zodiac debates. You simply can't because you don't have all the elements that are necessary to, to reach the right conclusion. It's like the story of the 10 blind boys with the elephants. One is who's holding the tail might say, okay, the elephant looks like a rope or resembles a rope. And the other another blind boy might say, the one who's standing next to the feet or the legs of the elephant and feels the legs, he says, okay, the elephant resembles a tree trunk. They both have only parts. They only feel or experience parts of the whole, and that's why they are incorrect. So if you're only considering longitude in connection with the debate or with astrology, you're bound to make mistakes because you don't have the complete picture. So what is necessary is that we go back to basics. What is the basis of astrology? That's positional astronomy. So we need to learn, or we need to consider, apart from longitude, to also look at latitude, at declination. We need to know what is parallel, contraparallel, and also azimuth and elevation. So, and then something that used to be a mystery or looked like a mystery will become very clear. As long as we're in the land of the blind, one eye is king, but one eye is still at a disadvantage in the land of where people see with two eyes, where they see the whole picture. So that is something we need to do. We need to go back to the basics. I'm struck also by the beauty of the answer. Neither side is losing face here. The question whether the sidereal or the tropical is correct, it's as silly as the question whether longitude or declination is correct. Things only get messy when we start using one system where the other should be used. You can compare it to radio and again in a very general sense. For example, the sidereal team is playing with the frequency dial, the station, while the tropical team is in charge of the volume knob. Why would you ignore one for the other when you can keep an eye and play with both? Both sidereal longitude and tropical declination should be looked at if we want to arrive at a better interpretation of the positions of the planets. Now, sidereal astrologers shouldn't feel too smug, thinking that it's only the tropical side who made a mistake, because quite a few astrologers, especially in India, sidereal astrologers are making a similar mistake if they are using the sidereal longitude where declination should be used. Makar Sankranti, or the start of Uttarayana, which is the sun's northern course, which starts from the winter solstice in Capricorn and should therefore be regarded in the light of declination and not sidereal longitude. Some use sidereal longitude to determine the start of Uttarayana. you have to use both sidereal longitude and tropical declination correctly. So a marriage between the two systems, between the sidereal and the tropical, is possible, but only if both longitude and declination are present. Their offspring is a more accurate location of the planet in question, and consequently a more accurate astrological interpretation. So we find that the answer to the zodiac problem is not one of interchangeability nor of discrimination, but of complementation. In the most beautiful way, one gets longitude, the other declination. So this is my shot at the zodiac question.